Today on the Pro Church Tools Show, we'll be talking about how to navigate politics as a Christian in 2020.
And this is important because political discourse is becoming increasingly toxic in our churches, families, and relationships.
By the end of this episode, you'll have the tools needed to talk about politics as a Christian in ways that are both firm and fair.
This isn't fair!
Well, hey there, and welcome to the Pro Church Tools Show. This show exists to help you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I'm joined as always to my right, your left, it's Alex Mills.
Hello, hello.
You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Spotify or Apple Podcasts are preferred. And if you're watching the video version on YouTube, youtube.com/ProChurchTools, make sure to leave a comment below, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, turn on notifications. We really do appreciate that.
Yeah.
In this episode, we are tackling a highly inflammatory subject, that being politics and their intersection with the Christian faith and how believers and followers of Christ should be engaging with politics.
It is an election year in the States.
Yes.
Yeah.
2020, absolutely. And we just finished our election.
We sure did.
In Canada in 2019. And now that I've brought that up, we may as well start by disclaiming a bit about who we are and the perspective we're coming from. Now,
Right.
the point of this episode is not to discuss our views on policy, candidates, or political party. The episode is all about establishing agreed upon rules for how we should engage on political issues. The how of what we're talking about, not the actual what.
Exactly.
So Alex and I, both Canadian. Alex, married to an American
Sure am.
from...
South Carolina, from the deep south.
We live in a border town, Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada, and we work professionally in communications. We're both formally trained in pastoral ministry. I have my degree in youth ministry. Alex is a practicing everyday pastor. Actually, today, he's a pastor today,
Real life.
right now.
Real life.
And 90% of the people that follow Pro Church Tools, let's say 80%, are American.
Right.
So the vast majority of my social feeds are very, very American based. And so I think we have a unique perspective here in that we're coming from our Canadian upbringing, but also we are deeply entrenched in the Christian American, evangelical American worldview.
Yeah, living on a border town with the States, like just literally right over, almost a stone's throw away right over here, has very interesting implications. Like me growing up, my dad is a political buff, and I grew up with American politics on the TV. Like every morning, my dad watches his American politics, and to this day, 26, 27 years later, my dad still tapes all of the Sunday morning, political shows in the States. He PVRs them, and then Sunday afternoon when we're over there for family dinner, he's watching them. So our house was always ringing with American politics just because we're so close. And I think that's a unique perspective that we share as Canadians, born and bred, living in Canada, but being so close with our neighbors to the south.
We've done a number of preaching breakdowns on this channel where we look at influential preachers and talk about the communication devices and techniques that they're using to take their message and communicate it to us. And that same thing is happening in the world of politics, of course. And so we want to take that same framework of an episode and apply it to politics so that you understand the way that people are communicating, how they're framing and phrasing their verbiage purposefully so that we can ideally have better dialogue, because there's a lot of fighting dirty right now within politics, and it seems to be getting worse. We're in 2020 now, just on the heels of the Christianity Today op-ed on Trump and the response from the Christian Post and all of the evangelical leaders that signed that. And it seems like the divide is growing ever greater. And so let's talk about why this conversation is important. We think that Christian families, friendships, churches, and communities are being torn apart because of politics. We've seen this in our own personal relationships. We've seen it in Christian communities. And we think that politics should ideally never be able to come between the common ground that we have in Christ. And if it does, it's probably because we're treating it improperly. Within Pro Church Tools, we have team members on the left and the right. I would say also on the far left and the far right. And like I said, my Facebook feed filled with American church leaders, and everything we're about to talk about, I have fallen victim to these things.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So they come from personal experience. This isn't meant to be us on our high horse talking about all the things that we need to do. I recognize that these are important because I have fallen victim to them.
I just had a conversation this past weekend with my dad about American politics. And I think a handful of times in that conversation said, like, I recognize I have blind spots too, because it's easy to forget that, right? You get so justified, or you think you see everything so clearly, but forget that people on the other side of the conversation believe what they believe just as much as what you believe about what you believe, right? So that's super important to admit that we both have fallen victim to a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about. And it's a challenge when choosing to engage in these kinds of conversations, a challenge I think that will just exist forever, to kind of keep these things at bay and wrestle with these things honestly, but do the work to actually wrestle with them.
Let's talk about some common ground that we want to establish, because there are 4 important stanzas that we believe. If you do not believe these, you may as well not continue with the episode, because it will likely just trigger your amygdala. Number 1, removing yourself from politics is not the solution. We don't think that looking at the political landscape and saying, this is too divisive, I'm just going to remove myself entirely and be apolitical. We don't think that's the right choice.
No.
Number 2, we also don't think that lukewarm passivity in the name of seeing both sides is the right answer. You don't need to just stand in the middle and be like, look, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. What do I say? Doesn't matter, because I empathize with both of you.
Yeah, I'm a centrist, just standing with Jesus in the middle.
Doesn't mean that you can't be in the middle of the actual spectrum.
Sure.
But if you're always saying, well, you're right and you're right, can we all just be friends? No, we're trying to find solutions to extremely complex problems. So passivity in the name of being an Enneagram 9, I would say, is also not helpful.
Yes.
Number 3, we believe everyone is doing the best they can with what they have. You may be used to villainizing the people across the aisle, but we firmly believe that, save for a few sociopaths, and Jesus loves them as well, we're all doing the best that we can with what we have.
Sure.
And a lot of us come from different upbringings, from different backgrounds, from different countries. We have different lived experiences, and all of those things are coloring what we believe in our worldview. But if you come to a conversation, to a dialogue, with the belief that the person you're looking in the eye, or tweeting with your fingers, is doing the best they can with what they have, you will not just see them as an issue or as this caricature of what people tell you the other is. You'll see them as a real human.
Yeah.
And then finally, the goal with all of this is to be firm and fair. We don't think that you need to water down your beliefs necessarily. You can have firm beliefs when they, as it pertains to politics. We just want to make sure that all of these dialogues are done fairly. And there are a lot of things currently that are unfair. Shall we dive in?
I guess so.
Rules for political engagement as Christians. Number 1, resist anecdotal extremes that paint the entire other side as monolithic. What do I mean by that? Well, consider this. A small share of U.S. adults, according to Pew, on Twitter, produce the most public tweets about politics. 97% of tweets from U.S. adults that have mentioned national politics over this study came from just 10% of users. So this is important as a baseline, that when you are on social media, for the most part, you are going to see these two sides that seem to be growing ever farther apart. The reality is that the people that most approve of, let's say, the current administration, and then on the other side, the people that most disapprove of the current administration are the ones that are populating the vast majority of these tweets. And this is important to understand, because if you, as we all do, drift to one side or the other, when you're seeing one group represent in an extremely divisive way one side, you will begin to just assume that everyone that aligns with those beliefs is like that.
Sure.
And that's an incredibly dangerous place to be in. Here's an example of the communication devices and the verbiage that gets used in this way. And we're going to use real examples for every one of these because we want to show this is what it actually looks like, not just an abstract way of communicating, but on paper, this is what it looks like. So this comes from Candace Owens. She says, leftism, atheism, and narcissism are a packaged deal. Basically saying, if you align at all with progressive politics, you don't believe in God, and you are a narcissist. You've probably heard this on the other side too.
Sure.
When people say like Christianity and bigotry are a packaged deal. If you're going to follow Christ, you're going to have to just believe and understand that you are a bigot. That's just the end of it.
Well, and isn't that that's what kind of frustrates me being so, I'm married into an American family. And I grew up with American politics. So very entrenched in this like dual party political system, which is a lot. And sure, there are independent candidates, but it's mostly a dual party political system. We've used the phrase already, left and right. And in Canada, our politics operate a little bit differently. There's a broader spectrum of political parties that can be elected into power. But when there's this dualistic left versus right dichotomy, it necessitates an us versus them kind of posture. And if you're not one of us, then you must be one of them. And then
Which is what Jesus did.
No, but that's a problem as Christians. If we adopt that kind of dichotomy, that position, it necessitates that if it is us versus them, then Jesus has to be one or the other. And of course, he's on my side, right? And so when religion and Christianity gets entrenched into this, it's very easy to demonize people on the other side. And that's where you can say, if you're on the other side, you're an atheist and a narcissist because, well, Jesus is on my side. And that's, especially on Twitter, the source of a lot of the problematic conversations that I see is just demonizing one or the other because the political system necessitates that. It's set up that way.
And you have to understand that this is coming from anecdotal extremes, purposefully framed in a way to make everyone else on the other side look like one thing.
Yeah.
So this will happen a lot in the abortion debate. Some left comedian will say something that definitely crosses the line.
Right.
And they'll say it in the name of either comedy, but also being informed by their own political beliefs. And then a Christian figurehead on the right will take that news story, publish it, and be like, see, this is what they all want to do.
Yeah.
They all believe that babies need to be killed mercilessly, and there's no reason for them to live. If you want to have an abortion, just go for it. And that's purposefully done in a way that's intended for you to be more entrenched in your own side. And the way you become more entrenched in your own side is to distance yourself from the other.
Exactly.
To recognize that, wow, I could never understand, empathize, or even have a relationship with someone on the other side because they all believe this extreme thing. And this is done with Christians as well, right? From the left, they'll be like, look what this one Christian did. They must all be like this.
Sure.
And if you are a Christian, you've certainly been subjugated to something like that, and you've probably been upset, maybe even outraged by it because it felt unfair. And that goes back to what we're trying to accomplish here, being firm and fair with our dialogue. Don't use anecdotal extremes that paint the entire other side as monolithic.
Yep.
Number 2, resist the deliberate awfulness of social media.
Delete all your accounts. Number 3.
Honestly.
It's a viable option in 2020.
Like, I would not put that in important to say, don't remove yourself from politics, just remove yourself from Twitter. My goodness.
Yes.
And you know what? Facebook is just as bad. I have a soft spot for Twitter, as I always will, and I am not here to demonize Twitter and uplift Facebook.
Right.
I won't do it.
Yeah.
Number 2, resist the deliberate awfulness of social media. We talk a lot about gaining attention on social for the purpose of your church sharing the message of Christ.
Yes.
And the prerequisite to gaining attention on social is to stop the scroll because the behavior that is required on social to gain attention is to stop someone from scrolling through their feed.
Sure.
There are a number of different ways that you can do this. You can take a smiling photo of someone in your church. You can use brutalism design. You can also make incredibly inflammatory statements.
That's going to stop the scroll.
Which is what happens on social. And the problem is that the algorithm incentivizes this. Why would an inflammatory statement cause you to stop the scroll? Because the algorithm knows that when you become outraged, you're more likely to spend time on that post than if you are stopping the scroll for a joyous reason. So you might see a beautiful little puppy, but you're more likely to stop the scroll for longer when you are outraged than when you are overwhelmed with cuteness.
Sure, and the engagement on those types of posts kind of bolsters that, right? So if it's an inflammatory post from people who agree with the sentiment of whatever that post is, it's just going to be a bunch of likes, a bunch of shares. And for people who don't agree with it, there's just going to be a bunch of comments saying like, you're a lunatic, why are you saying this, blah, 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 blah. So it incites an incredible amount of engagement as well, which the algorithm is going to say, yeah, let's just keep showing this to people. And it initiates a cycle of outrage.
Here's what the New Yorker says about it. The problem is the business model based on the manipulation of individual behavior. Social media platforms know what you're seeing, and they know how you acted in the immediate aftermath of seeing it. They know when you just stop scrolling. That's not an engagement figure that the creator will ever see.
Right.
I'll never know if my post makes you stop scrolling. I'll only know if you engage with it. But the algorithm knows when you stop scrolling and for how long you stop scrolling.
It's called hover time.
They know because they're always watching you. And they can decide from there what you'll see next in order to further determine how you act. A feedback loop that gets progressively tighter until it becomes a binding force on an individual's free will. My God.
That was dark. I didn't expect that to take such a dark turn
This
at the end there.
article is outstanding. We'll have it linked in the show notes. Negative emotions like outrage and contempt and anxiety tend to drive significantly more engagement than positive
Sure
ones.
they do.
And hey, if you are listening or watching this episode, there is a chance that your amygdala has already been activated by the subject matter and you've already begun assigning virtues to,
You may
let's
have
say,
already
me.
commented on this YouTube video before we got to this point.
And maybe Alex or I have told on ourselves in some way of what we may believe about certain policies, political candidates,
Sure.
or parties, and you've already begun assigning virtues to us based on something that we said, because in your mind, someone has painted one of us like this.
Yeah.
And that is a huge part of the problem.
Yeah.
Let's give you some great examples from one of our favorite Twitter follows, that is Pastor Greg Locke.
Okay.
If you put your name as Pastor in a Twitter handle,
Maybe act like one.
whoa. Okay.
Sorry.
We weren't. You're going to subscribe.
My amygdala is activated.
I've got 3 tweets here from Pastor Greg Locke. From Greg Locke. The first one says this: I'd love to one day meet the Pope. I want to give him a firm handshake, look him straight in his eyes, and tell him he's the greatest false prophet on the planet. Hashtag dangerous devil. That was tweeted on January 1st, 2020. Happy New Year. Here's another one. Trying to say that Christianity today speaks for all evangelicals is like saying the Taliban speaks for all Muslims. This pastor stands with Donald Trump, and I don't care who it chaps. Finally, third one. Happy hashtag pronouns day. For the record, I won't be dancing awkwardly around trying to make you feel safer. He/she, you know, normal talk. I don't care how that makes you feel. I won't be asking, and yes, I will assume your gender. Straight from the gospel. So what we're doing here is looking at how he's purposely framing these. He says it in that second tweet. I don't care who it chaps. He's purposefully making a statement that he knows will enrage his opponents and make his followers really happy. Finally, someone standing up for the truth. This is a very transparent and obvious manipulative way of communicating. And we need to be able to see through it and not be deceived by it. Happy Pronouns Day. For the record, I won't be doing this. I won't be doing this. You are a great false prophet. You are a dangerous devil. All of this communication, all of this verbiage is purposefully inflammatory.
You got to hand it to the guy for being like so unashamedly Greg Locke. Like he knows what he believes and he is going to tell you what he believes.
I think he knows how social media works and he understands algorithms. And he's found that when I tweet extremely inflammatory things, more people see my content and that gives me the opportunities that I have today. I mean, he was recently at the White House. My guess is that you're not going to get an invite to the White House if you don't have X amount of followers, and you don't get X amount of followers if you're making intelligent, reasonable, fair statements.
Yeah, I think you're right.
This is a highly problematic ecosystem that exists and is incentivizing bad behavior, which is why this episode we wanted to do, because we as followers of Christ, we need to be better than this.
Well, and you just said it. You mentioned his name. There's nothing, regardless of what this guy believes, and we're gonna use examples from people on the other side of Greg Locke as well. Regardless of what these people believe, there's no spirit of Christ to this type of rhetoric online. There's nothing Christ-like about it. And if we as
You don't think Jesus would say that Christianity today is the Taliban?
Stop.
That's what the tweet says!
If we as citizens of Canada or citizens of the United States or any country that you're listening to who live in a nation but ascribe our true citizenship to the kingdom of heaven, right? The kingdom of Christ. There's a lot of tension in that. And I think that's a struggle for Christians and how we engage with politics. Because if you don't ascribe to a greater kingdom, you can engage with politics however you want, and your conscience
point.
is clear. But as Christ followers who say that Jesus is Lord, we have a duty with when we engage with the politics in the land in which we live, we have a duty to engage with it in a Christ-like way with the Spirit of Christ. And this sensationalism that folks are leveraging online, there's nothing Christ-like about it.
Well, and it does come from the conflation of the kingdom of America with the kingdom of God.
Sure.
And this isn't anything new. Obviously, it's unique currently to America in some ways, but we saw it with the coming of Jesus.
Yeah, it's Rome, it's Babylon, it's Europe, now it's America, right?
Living in an occupied land, and everyone's like, finally, the Messiah is here. We are going to be in charge.
Yeah.
Jesus is like, what? No, that's not the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
The kingdom of God isn't us being in charge. It's subverting the systems of power by dying to oneself.
Yeah.
That's what makes it the upside down kingdom. We're not trying to gain power. In fact, it becomes a lot more difficult to be a Christian when you are the empire and when you do have the power.
Yeah, it's riding on a borrowed donkey, not an esteemed war horse.
Let's talk about number 3, resist villainizing the other. And we've talked about how that happens. It usually happens through things like using anecdotal extremes to say this is how everyone is. Can you believe how crazy they are? That's how it happens. But when you find yourself beginning to villainize the other automatically, again, assigning virtues to someone based on one thing they say and just painting them as X, Y, and Z, this is who they are, that's what we need to resist. Here's a version of that happening on the left. This comes from John Pavlovich on Twitter. For the love of God, if you're a decent, rational human being, please register to vote and hashtag vote blue. Seriously, what's this implying? If you do not vote blue, you are not decent, nor are you rational. Well, that can't be true. It's the same thing that Candace Owens was doing earlier.
Yeah.
You are a narcissist and an atheist if you believe in progressive politics and if you vote against Trump. Here's an example of not a famous person on social media, and I'm not going to say their name. Joe, let's make sure we blur this out when we post it. But this is someone who comes from my Facebook feed. And this is a great example of what probably many of us are seeing on our Facebook feeds if they're not complete echo chambers.
Yeah.
So on December 14th, this individual posted about their church, and it was a welcome to their Christmas upcoming service. And
Welcome
it says,
home.
from the nurseries to the senior ministry, there's a place here for you to grow and be a part of something truly special. The graphic reads, welcome home. A few days later, this same person, who I am friends with on Facebook because of Pro Church Tools, I don't know this person individually,
Right.
and hear me loud and clear. I'm not saying they're a bad person. I am saying that they are falling prey for the types of communication and framing of politics that we need to avoid. Because a few days later, this same person who just said, there's a place for you here, welcome home, says this. Here it is, a fact. You are an utter fool if you think taking guns away will solve the violence problem. I try not to be pointed on here, but this calls for pointedness. And he goes on. So, there's a place here for you. Welcome home to our church. But if you believe in gun control beyond what we have now, you are an utter fool. Welcome home.
Yeah.
You fool. You're a fool. Welcome home.
And we see that. How often do we see this? And it's imperative to go back to our first point and that data from Pew that you mentioned, where you said 97% of all political tweets come from 10% of all users. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
So remembering that a lot of these sensational statements are coming from the top 5% on both sides, right? Presumably is what that means. And so I see this all too often online, and it gets me frustrated because I feel I don't do a lot of partaking in the conversation. I do a lot of observing of the conversation.
Healthy.
On Twitter and Facebook. And I feel kind of like trapped in the middle because it's like watching two parents, yell at each other when they're going through a divorce. And it's just like, I can't remedy this. I can't get in between this because it's just vile going back and forth. And to be frank, like to be honest with you, going into 2020 and just on the heels of this conversation I had with my dad on the weekend, like I was feeling a little bit hopeless. Just
Something we've probably all felt.
But like just watching these conversations, we're like, how can we come back from this? How can we be better than this? How can we meet in the middle? And not to say that like centrism is the answer or even a thing, but how can we meet in the middle in the way that how can we start with empathy? How can we see that it's not us versus them, it's us for them, right? How can we see that we're all sons, we're all daughters, we are all citizens of the kingdom of heaven, just trying to figure it out? And I don't see, at least right now in this political climate and in the spaces I'm involved in online, I'm sounding terribly hopeless right now. So
Subscribe.
but I don't see at least a clear path towards a way in which we stop demonizing each other or villainizing each other, and that's got me feeling a little dark. But I'm hopeful in the way that in an expression of faith kind of way, that like I don't see it, but I believe that there is a way.
Well, just as a response to that, all that politics is finding solutions to extremely complex issues.
Sure.
And I've spoken with one of the people in Pro Church Tools, who I would say is the most far-right person that we have. And I remember, because we've had multiple conversations, American-born, and I would look at them and be like, how can you believe this, this, and this? I don't understand. And I had a relationship with this person. And so I was like, I feel like I know you, and I trust your judgment. And yet, in these things, I'm having trouble understanding. And we've had conversations over, let's say, 8 total hours over the years. And we would talk about individual points. We would talk about individual policies. And eventually it came down to the fact that I had a perspective on government being a lot more involved than he had. He was very much like government should be almost not involved at all in personal lives of its citizens. And I was like, oh, I think I like a little bit more government involvement.
Yeah.
And really simply, that would make a lot of sense because I'm born in Canada and he's born in, rural America.
Sure.
And that makes a lot of sense that we would both see it that way. And we both wanted less gun violence. We both wanted women to have more opportunity. And we both wanted more immigrants to come here and experience the American dream. And we both wanted less people or less abortions. We were coming at it from 2 very different ways.
Right.
And from the outset, we were like villainizing each other. Or at least I could feel the tug within me to be like, of course you don't want like immigrants to come in this way because X, Y, and Z, I'm painting him in an unfair way. And we just got down to the source of it. It was like, oh, these complex problems, we believe in fundamentally different ways to solve them. And once we kind of had gotten down to that like base, we were able to have a lot better dialogue because we both wanted very much the same things. And we just thought, and that's not always the case. Like you will have differing opinions on what should actually be happening. But when you can get past the initial things, and this can usually only happen in relationship over
I was going to say,
times.
what did that require? Not just a relationship, but at length conversations, face-to-face, some online, but mostly face-to-face, that weren't just sensational statements thrown out into the Twitterverse to contribute to our personal little echo chambers, but it required like the hard and patient work. And that's in such a connected digital age. And that's what we're doing here, trying to help churches navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years, which is the advent of the internet, the different ways, the unique ways that we're connected that are unprecedented. We've never been able to be connected in the ways that we are. And so how do we navigate that? How can we have these kinds of helpful dialogues online with people that we're not in deep relationship with? Do we have a responsibility to do that? And if we do, how can we do it? Right?
It's another example of how this communication shift is changing everything, because my personal belief is that when it comes to politics, the types of content that should be created surrounding this should be incredibly in-depth, dry, boring material.
Sure.
And that's why we're not talking about policy and candidates and our specific beliefs, because I am not an expert in politics whatsoever. My professional endeavor is understanding communication, how we talk. And so if it was up to me, we would not have like Twitter talking about these things.
Right.
But what has happened? If you are a journalist, if you're a news agency, if you are a newspaper, you're recognizing how much this communication shift is affecting your industry. And you are losing influence, losing money, and the future of journalism as we know it is at risk in certain ways.
Yeah.
What is that response? You can try pivoting to video. You can try X, Y, and Z. You can try online subscriptions. But nothing gets clicks and thus ad revenue like sensationalism. And so the system as it is rewarding this type of ecosystem being created, because who wants to read a 4,000 word article that's incredibly dry about the best solutions to foreign policy when someone could just say like, well, we just need to start this war. We just need to we should never be involved in violence whatsoever. It's like, those are the things that are going to get the most click. And if you as a journalism person, company can't survive by doing what you should be doing, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
And then you find yourself doing things you don't want to, but then you rationalize it in the name of, well, if we're not around, like, it's just going to be Breitbart. It's just going to be BuzzFeed. Like, there's got to be some...
Hey, what's wrong with BuzzFeed? I like those listicles.
The reason I say that is because I was looking at trustworthiness of sites.
Okay.
Breitbart was the lowest on the right, and BuzzFeed was the lowest on the left.
Nice.
That's just what the rating was.
Right.
I'm not inferring what I believe.
Right. You know, like those listicles? Like, what type of avocado sandwich are you in 2020? That's helpful content from BuzzFeed.
Another example of villainizing the other. This comes from a radio interview with Eric Metaxas and Billy Graham. Pardon me, Franklin Graham, dear God, I apologize. November 21st. Metaxas asks Franklin Graham, what do you think of what is happening right now? I mean, it's a very bizarre situation to be living in a country where some people seem to exist. They exist to undermine the President of the United States, my emphasis added. It's just a bizarre time for most Americans, Franklin Graham. Response, well, I believe it's almost a demonic power that's trying, at which point Metaxas interjected, I would disagree. It's not almost demonic. You and I know, at the heart, it's a spiritual battle. What do we have now? Now we have the son of Billy Graham saying, if you don't side with President Trump, you're under the forces of demonic influence.
Well, and is that not in Christianity? Is that not the largest example of villainizing the other?
Calling them demons? Yes, probably about as bad as it gets.
Most of us may have seen the photo of these two gentlemen posing just before Christmas of a book that they wrote, and it had President Trump on the front, and there was a border wall, and on the other side there were immigrants trying to get in, and amidst the immigrants there were cartoon monsters, and it's like it's a very clear, very bold political statement in line with what we just read about villainizing the other in order to bolster their position, in order to validate themselves. Because if the other side are literally subject to demonic power, that means that the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ is on our side. We're validated in what we believe. We vote this color. We do this. We do that. And it's just not helpful when we step back and again, back to starting these conversations from a point of empathy, right? When we step back and perceive the person on the other side, right? Like, there are going to be people on the other side. We're not going to agree on everything.
No.
But to see the God in them first and foremost and operate from empathy, it will never necessitate demonizing of each other. And then when we can have that open dialogue, we can be challenged by the other person and maybe learn, like maybe grow, because we'll never grow in these echo chamber environments that we curate online for ourselves. And that's a responsibility we have, especially on Twitter. I find like I have to go out of my way to follow people who have voices that aren't saying the same things that I'm telling myself, just to make sure that I'm exposed to more voices, to keep my horizons broad, and to make sure that I'm not curating an echo chamber just to confirm my bias, but that I'm being challenged to grow every day that I expose myself to these voices online.
Absolutely. We think that, again, this type of communication technique, it's very transparent, it's very manipulative, and it's not fair. So we need to recognize when it's happening and then not reward the Christian figureheads that are speaking in these ways, because all it does is further their recognition that it works, and thus they do it more.
Sure.
Next up, resist omission and inconsistent application of facts. Resist the narrative of omission. When does this happen? This happens when we talk about what our side has accomplished, what our side has done, all of the good they have worked for, and we don't ever acknowledge all of the bad that they've also done. This is, to me, always one of the most telling signs that a person is not thinking critically and they are operating from a kingdom of America standpoint, not a kingdom of God standpoint. And again, if you're not a Christian, go for it. Why? That's what you should be doing.
Yeah.
Or that's what you would be doing.
Yeah.
But for those of us that identify as followers of Jesus, this is something that we must stay away from. So I'll start with Obama here. Obama had this problem in a huge way because for those that would have voted for him and supported him, he is the most likable dude.
Oh, yeah.
His family, seemingly perfect.
Yes.
Beautiful family. He's always well-spoken.
He's hilarious. He's charismatic.
The worst thing that he ever did from like a PR standpoint was the tan suit. That's all he had. It's just like, this guy never does he never says anything wrong.
I know.
And that unfairly colored many of his decisions because we just assumed for those that would support him, oh, well, everything he did was awesome because look at how well-spoken he is and how pretty he is. And look at his amazing family.
Yeah.
Man, well, they weren't even torn apart by politics. They were still raised right. Amazing. Michelle Obama's on the New York Times bestseller list. Becoming. Let's go.
Yeah. And that's a sin of omission to exalt those things and not mention his policy infractions or whatever.
The things that he did that like went against what Jesus would want to do.
Exactly. And unfortunately, we see this every election cycle, probably in whatever country you call home. Every election cycle, we see this in political parties. In the States, you have like this pendulum, those what are those balls called? That you put on your desk. I don't know what they're called, but you have that effect. It's like this pendulum where it's like Republican, Democrat, and every election cycle they talk about what the other side didn't do and what we're going to do, and then it just happens again next 4 years. It happens in Canada too. Every political campaign is built on what the other side, what they did wrong, how they blew it, and how look at what we're doing. And it perpetuates that. And so we do it in our own lives too. And our own political discourse that you and I have, or me and somebody else in the office who don't agree over a certain policy. I do this all the time. I'm a slave to this one all the time where it's like, right, but think about this. And they're like, right, but what about that? And it's like, oh, I never read that article because I wasn't looking for it. I was looking for something to bolster my opinion, to confirm my bias.
So we see this a lot with evangelicals that currently will say, look, we don't agree with everything Trump says. And he's a little rough around the edges, almost like the anti-Obama in that stance.
Yes.
But look at all the good that he's accomplishing. The economy, the appointment of conservative judges, the stances for X, Y, and Z. And the problem is that we then omit all of the things that have been done within this administration that are definitely things that we don't want. For instance, the FBI reported recently that violent hate crimes are at a 16-year high in America, and those that are most vulnerable to these hate crimes are Latinos. How could this have happened? I have no idea. If you write an op-ed, Wayne Grudem, about all the great things that Trump has done, and we can all go, you know what? Well, I guess that is good. Economy. No one's upset about that. Right. Sure, we all measure it differently, and but hey, okay, we'll give you that. Conservative judges, that's your thing. Go for it. Oh, more laws that will hopefully make abortions lesser. Great. It's like, why are you only talking about the positives?
Yeah,
it's very transparent and again manipulative. We need to be more critical thinkers. If you stand for your one side and never talk about the mistakes they made, it's very, very difficult for me to find you trustworthy, because as a citizen of heaven, you cannot be unilaterally aligned with a politician or a political party, because to be a politician requires certain things that are less than becoming. To be appointed as the leader of the Democrats or the Republicans of any political party, you have to make enough compromises. You have to do enough things just because the political system is the way that it is and humanity is broken in the way that it is. For you to unilaterally align with a politician is very, very dangerous. And for you to be the communicator on behalf of Christians, again, a Christian figurehead, and for you to create this peace with the goal to rally the Christians to vote one way or another, I understand why it would be beneficial to only talk about the good, to paint this choice as the only possible choice, but it's irresponsible and it's bad. It's bad.
And in what other area of life or relationship can you do that without, like, before people just end up calling you on it, right? Like, you can't do that in a marriage. Like, I can't just walk into my home and tell my wife that, like, look at all this stuff I've done. Like, I'm justified in everything I'm doing because of this, this, and this. And she's like, right, but what about the way you just talked to me? Or what about this? It's like, no, but look at how clean the dishes are. Like, I couldn't get away with that in my house. I couldn't get away with that in my marriage. I couldn't get away with that in my friendship or with my coworkers. And so, like, leveraging that kind of posture to gain political power is just like,
Yes,
it's just not Christ-like.
I liked my word, bad. Here's a Franklin Graham excerpt from his Facebook page. Look at all the president has accomplished in a very short time. The economy of our nation is the strongest it's been in 50 years. ISIS, been defeated. The president has renegotiated trade deals to benefit all Americans. The list of accomplishments is long, but for me as a Christian, the fact that he's the most pro-life president in modern history is extremely important. And Christianity today wants us to ignore that, to say it doesn't count. The president has been a staunch defender of religious freedom at home and around the world, and Christianity today wants us to ignore that. Also, the president has appointed conservative judges in record number, and Christianity today wants us to ignore that. And it goes on. The problem also here is when we assign all of the good that's been accomplished solely to this individual leader. And all the bad that happens, then we say, well, there's a lot of things that have contributed to that. I think it's a little naive to assume that the economy being good could be assigned to one person.
Sure.
Seems a little bit simplistic.
Sure.
If you become a president when the 2008 crash happens, you wouldn't blame the economy on that person.
Right.
Because there's a lot that built up
Yeah.
before that. Could they have contributed? Absolutely. But you wouldn't say, wow, it's unfortunate for that person that they created the 2008 crash. There's a lot of things that went into that, and most of us didn't even see it coming. So how could it be related to one person if we didn't even see it coming? Similarly, if you're going to say, look at Trump, the economy is great, awesome president, but hate crimes are at an 18-year high, and Latinos are the most vulnerable. Yeah, but that's... Trump may have contributed to part of that, but not all of it. Again, that's inconsistent application, and it's transparent and not helpful. If you're going to say this is awesome that they did that in a complex way, then you have to say it's equally bad and assign all responsibility that the bad things happened. Or what I would propose is that these are complex things, and we don't say that one person accomplished them because, again, that's naive and ignorant.
Exactly, yeah.
Next up, review and moderate your media intake. This is a quote from the New Yorker. It says, we find ourselves today connected to vast repositories of knowledge, and yet we have not learned to think. In fact, the opposite is true. That which was intended to enlighten the world, the internet, in practice darkens it. The abundance of information through the internet and the plurality of worldviews now accessible to us are not producing a coherent consensus reality, but one riven by fundamentalist insistence on simplistic narratives, conspiracy theories, and post-factual politics. It is on this contradiction that the idea of a new dark age turns, an age in which the value we've placed upon knowledge is destroyed by the abundance of that profitable commodity, and in which we look about ourselves in search of new ways to understand the world.
Wow.
It's very bizarre. There was this belief when the internet happened. Finally, we'll be able to understand truth in a new way, because we won't just get around the Thanksgiving table and talk about the things that we heard about. We'll be able to look up and verify if they are true or not.
Yeah, like a new age of enlightenment, basically.
Hey, because you won't have, Aunt Karen being like, well, I heard this person is, we know that's not true. Here's we have the facts.
Yeah.
And what's happened is now we have this, I hope this doesn't last forever, but what we have is this ecosystem where we're digging our heels in even farther, and when something is presented as fact that's contrary to what we expect, we just say fake news.
Yeah.
That can't be true.
Right.
Because it can't be. Well, but we have verification that it's true. No, it's not true.
Yeah, which is just lazy.
Alternative facts.
Yeah.
Remember when that became a thing?
Hold
We were
on.
like, that can't
what
be
are they
real.
saying here? Post-factual. I like that.
This is why I am thankful for my Facebook feed in a way. Most of the people I am connected with on Facebook, they're not like friends in person. They're people that are connected to Pro-Church Nation, added me, and I'm like, sure, we can be friends.
Yeah.
And this has created a very interesting Facebook feed because I have all of my friends that maybe believe more like me, and then I have all of these people that believe very different things. And so, nice for me, I don't actually have to work to curate a feed that is wide-reaching. It's kind of happened organically through Pro-Church tools.
Yeah.
But what's important here is that you need to have, as much as possible, unbiased sources of media within your intake to ensure that you're not being weaponized and manipulated for the sake of political gain for one party. We've already described that is what the ecosystem is trying to do. The algorithm's goal is to earn money off you. They do that by getting you to spend more time on social. And the best way for them to get you to spend more time is to piss you off.
Yeah.
So you can't let them do that. You have to moderate your media intake, find some unbiased sources that you believe are trustworthy, and then have 3 or 4 of them and cross-reference them.
How can we find those sources?
Well, there's an easy Google search that you can do. Just search news source ratings or unbiased news source ratings. And then if you don't trust one website, because again, you're very, very hesitant or suspicious of journalism as a whole, I would look at all of the different infographics that exist. And they rank the trustworthiness rating. They show you, okay, if they do align, this is where they would generally align. And then find a few that you're comfortable with. But if you're solely getting your information from Fox News and Breitbart, that's not good. Right. And then on the other side, if you're solely getting your information from, like I said earlier, BuzzFeed and then extremely liberal blogs, like that's not good either. Yeah. You need to have something in the middle that will say, this is a fact, this is not. And that way, at least we can, like, I love this saying, you have the right to your own opinion, you don't have your right to your own facts. Like,
right, that's good.
And if we at least can start there, then we can have conversations about, again, solutions to complex problems.
Yeah, and it requires a little bit of like wisdom and discernment here as well. I'm thinking a little bit outside of the political sphere, but within the realm of Christianity. There was a season where I was listening to a lot of podcasts from people and voices who just lean differently than I do, in order to like just expand my perspective. And I enjoyed that for a season, but it got to a point where I had to discern that, like, okay, I've listened to these voices enough for now. Or this voice is saying something that, although I'm thankful to be exposed to it, I don't agree with it. So I'm not, and I think it's harmful or whatever. So I'm not going to go out of my way to keep feeding that in. So this kind of careful curation does require discernment and wisdom, and maybe try and do it in community. Like maybe don't like do this on your own. Like if you have a husband or a wife or friends like within the office, when we're having these kinds of political discourses, opening up ourselves to considering different sources is going to be very helpful for you. It's going to stretch you. It can be a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit painful, but can you grow without growing pains, right? Well, yeah. You can't. And so if we're all trying to grow, which I hope we are, I know I am, it's going to require a little bit of discomfort. It's going to require listening to people that aren't just going to feed your ego and confirm your biases. But I think that's what this kind of, to wrestle with this discourse honestly and faithfully, I think that's what it requires.
And it's very important that you bring that up because like there are limits to this.
Sure.
And if you're opening your social feed every single day and you're getting really worked up because you have an amygdala, and there's only so much self-control that you can have. There are things that are going to upset you, and you can choose how you respond, but you don't always get to choose how you react in the instant. Mm-hmm. And so if you're opening up your social feed and you're like, man, this is really unhealthy for me, then maybe there's a season where you do need to like pull back. We said being apolitical isn't the answer permanently, but maybe removing politics from your feed for a season before like diving back in is what needs to be done. Yeah. And that's totally okay. I have a bunch of words muted on my Twitter feed right now because I got to a point after about 12 to 24 months of engaging, I was like, I need a break because I'm not reacting always the way that I want to. Mm-hmm. And I'm realizing that I'm not enjoying social and it's working me up and I don't need this added anxiety. And now I find ways to engage with it in different ways because one of them was unhealthy. And so this is all very complex. We're providing like guidelines, rules for engagement, but there's so much nuance here, which is why we are so frustrated with the current climate because we remove nuance, we remove complexity, and we just say black and white, good and bad. You put kids in cages or you don't. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's it.
Left, right, us, them.
Final, resist alignment with the political party. Here's the thought exercise we want to leave you with. When was the last time you strongly disagreed with the side you drift toward? If you can't think of a time within the last 3, 6, 12 months where you strongly disagreed with the right, you strongly disagreed with the left, then my suggestion would be that you're probably aligning more with the kingdom of America or the kingdom of X political party than the kingdom of Christ. Mm-hmm. Because the kingdom of Christ requires strong disagreement almost ongoing in an ongoing way with both political parties because they are not looking out for the interest of those that would be following Jesus. Because you don't get into power by laying your power down.
Yeah.
So to be in power, you would have to act in a way that is almost antithesis to the kingdom of God, and thus you cannot fully align. So if you're unilaterally aligned with one political party, and you can't think of the last time you strongly disagreed with them, that to me would be a warning sign that I would want to investigate in my own life, because it has happened to me.
Yeah.
Where I've just been on one side and be like, man, they finally figured this out. Yeah. Then I look back and I was like, ooh, I had been activated.
Right. Yeah. And it can be a challenge for us as Christ followers who are more than 2,000 years removed from Christ walking on the earth to really grasp the magnitude of what it means to say that Jesus is Lord. You know, in first century Rome, that had incredible implications to it. For someone to say that Jesus is Lord was to say that Caesar is not. And for the folks who had the courage to say that, it often ended in some sort of tragedy, some sort of martyr's death, some sort of persecution. And that was the cost of carrying the cross of Christ. And that was the kingdom that he preached. And for us, I'll speak for myself. For me, I have kind of lost sight of the true implications of what it means to be a citizen of heaven first, to say that above all else, Jesus is Lord. And just recently, I've started to live that out in more radical ways, and I've also started to count the cost of it, because it has come at a cost. The implications have been manifesting themselves in more real ways. And I'm like, and I feel like I'm getting a taste of, not to say that I have anything figured out, but I think I'm getting a taste of what it actually means to ascribe to the kingdom of heaven and to say that Jesus is King. Jesus is Lord. And that takes courage. It takes laying down your life. It takes living counterculturally, which in the West is extremely challenging. But is that not the call of Christ? I think it is. And I think, that's kind of where we're ending this. I think that's where we need to end it. And it's also where we need to start it. I think in any political discourse that we have, in any engagement that we have in these kinds of conversations, if it doesn't begin and end with the kingdom of Christ, we're going to find ourselves belonging to a political party in a tribalistic way that I don't think is the way of Christ.
Well said. Summary for the rules of engagement for Christians when it comes to politics. Firstly, resist anecdotal extremes that paint the entire other side as monolithic. Resist the deliberate awfulness of social media. Resist villainizing the other. Resist omission and the inconsistent application of facts and narrative. Review and moderate your media intake, and resist unilateral alignment with one political party. We'll be back in just a moment. We're excited to make a big announcement here in the month of January, in the year of our Lord, 2020.
Yes, thank you, Lord.
Our giving platform, Rebel Give, that you can find at rebelgive.com, has become the first ever church giving platform to offer transaction-free bank account giving.
Yes.
This is important because whenever you engage with a digital transaction, whether that be at the grocery store, tapping your credit card, or giving to your church online, there's a transaction fee that gets accrued. So if you give with your credit card, that transaction fee will usually be between 1.9% and 4%, something like that. So with Rebel Give, we make it where the donor is always the one that's taking care of that credit card fee.
Right.
But you can also give with your bank account through Rebel Give and through most church giving platforms. And it's becoming a lot more intelligent. It used to be where you had to enter like all the routing numbers.
Right.
Like we now have ways with Rebel Give that you can connect your online giving just by like logging in using your online banking credentials. So it's just as easy as giving with your credit card. And most church giving platforms will still charge a percentage and a transaction fee, a flat fee for this gift. So let's say you want to give $1,000 through your bank account, they'll charge 1% plus 25 cents.
Right.
And that can be, especially with larger gifts that are generally through bank account giving, can be substantial. And what we found is that through our negotiations with our processing partner, the 1% that gets added by church giving platforms is just what the church giving platform is taking.
Right.
When we negotiated our rate with Rebel Give as a brand new giving platform with no giving history, so there's no leverage we had in this negotiation. Like, well, we're going to process this many millions, so give us a preferential rate. We're brand new. Can you help us? They're like, For all bank account giving, it's called ACH within the United States. For all that giving, it'll just be a flat 25-cent fee. And that's what we've charged for the first year of operating Rebel Give.
Which is great, because if the gift is $1, $1,000, $100,000, you're only paying 25 cents as a giver. So there's an incentive there to give with ACH direct bank giving.
So we're not taking a percentage, which is what many of the other giving platforms are, the big ones. You can look at Tithely, PushPay, all the ministry brand run giving platforms like Kindred and Easy Tithe. They're taking a percentage of ACH giving to keep for themselves. It's a giving tax that they are assigning just because they can. Because processing fees are the norm in giving, which we think
industry standard.
We don't like that. We want to set the new standard. And so starting now with Rebel Give, you can give via your bank account without any transaction fees. There's no 1%.
No fixed rate, nothing.
You don't even have to pay a quarter. We are absorbing that because we think that you should be able to receive money and give money to your church digitally with no fees whatsoever. So, of course, we have Rebel Give needs to make money. How do we do it? We have a flat monthly fee, which we've recently also cut in half. It's $79 a month paid annually, or $99 per month if you want to go in a month-to-month cycle. That's all that you'll ever pay to accept giving at your church. And you might be asking, okay, but how much giving is actually done through bank accounts? Isn't most of it through credit card? And I can't speak for other platforms here, but through Rebel Give, more than 65%, more than 2/3 of giving through Rebel Give is done via bank accounts.
Yeah, because people want to pay lower fees.
And we do it programmatically. So if you go to give with your credit card through Rebel Give, there's this like, oh, okay, if you give with your credit card $100, we're going to charge you a $1.90 convenience fee. And the reason this is charged is because there are processing fees that are inevitable with credit card gifts. And we don't want your church to lose that, so we're going to charge it to you, the donor. If you don't want to do this, we understand. You can give through your bank account for free. What happens? People give through their bank account for free.
Yes.
It's amazing that this has not yet happened in my mind. We're very excited to be the first ones to do it. We're trying to set a new standard in church giving, because we don't think that your church should be charged a 1% tax on every gift just because someone can. Imagine paying 1% of your giving to have a church website. Oh yeah, we run Nucleus. It's 1% of all of your giving to subscribe to Nucleus.
Right.
That would be obscene. You would never stand for that. But that's what we're standing for with our church giving platforms. You want to use our form online on your website? It costs 1% of everything you receive. It's ludicrous. We don't like it. We think churches deserve another option. You can get started for free at rebelgive.com. Lower prices, no fees on ACH giving. Trying to set the new standard for the world of church giving.
Sounds like good news to me.
I think so. Rebelgive.com is the place to do that. If you have questions, please do let us know. We're debuting a new segment now.
Top 10.
We thought top 5 wasn't long enough. We're going to skip top 5 this week. We're introducing a new segment called Dad Life.
Hashtag Dad Life. I'm going to make us shirts.
We're not debuting the new segment anymore. You know, this episode's been heavy. Necessary, but a bit heavy. We wanted to bring some levity to the episode of the Pro Church Tools show this week. Debuting a new segment called Dad Life. Basically talking about our...
just being dads.
what it's like to be a dad in 2020 and beyond.
We're different kinds of dads.
Absolutely.
You've got your sweet little girl.
Sweet. Well,
we'll
see.
Dude, she is getting sweeter by the day.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why.
She's the best. But Rebecca and I don't have kids of our own yet, but we've been fostering this last year. We've had lots of kids come in and out of our home. And it's a different kind of parenting. Like, you know, people say, Rebecca just wrote about this online.
Oh, I saw it. I felt convicted. I sought the Lord.
No, and it's fine. But people will say to us when they hear about us fostering or meet one of the kids that we have, they'll say, oh, this is great practice. And you know what? That's so well-intentioned. And they're like, you have not offended us at all. But like, this is not practice. This is parenting. Because we're hopeful that we're going to be able to have children of our own, but some people can't. And some people will be a foster parent forever or an adoptive parent forever, and that doesn't make the job any less dadding or momming. So it's a different kind of parenting, but we are learning a lot. Baptism by fire, if you will.
So one lesson I'm trying to ingrain early in my daughter's life. She's 4 years old currently, turning 5 in March of 2020. Her name is Lily. And one lesson I'm trying to ingrain early in her is, you know, responsibility for her actions.
Political discourse. Oh,
I will say one thing.
Lily, I've got something for you to listen to.
I never dumb down my language. That's something I always appreciated my mom to do. I use very big words with her, and I know it's going to pay dividends. That's not the story, though.
Her actions. Responsibility for her actions.
I'm trying to get her to realize you have the freedom to choose, but whatever you do choose has consequences, good and bad.
Okay.
Of course, she's 4. So I can't really give her true freedom to choose.
Right.
So let's use eating as an example, a thing that young kids are always struggling with. So she'll be like, Daddy, I want a treat. And I'll be like, great. I understand your propensity for sweets. Not something I have per se.
All right. I wonder where she got that from.
If you want to have, a piece of candy for dessert, we need you to have, a healthy meal. So you can choose any of the 3 following things as the first thing to eat. A cucumber, yogurt to get some protein because she does not eat meat as of yet, or a fruit. And I'll give her this freedom to choose. She then chooses. Then I'll say, okay, great. Now you have to have 2 more healthy things. Then eventually. So I'm creating this framework for choices and consequences. This has backfired in one way, in that it has taught her that everything is a deal to be made.
Oh, yeah.
So
she's the master deal maker.
She'll literally speak to this episode like Trump. She'll be, Dad, she has said this, Dad, I'm going to make a deal. You're going to love this deal.
Yes.
Dad, you're going to love this deal.
She's 4.
So one recent food one, she's like, I was like, we're watching football. I was like, I don't want to cook. Let's order some pizza for dinner. She's like, oh, Daddy, I want cheese pizza. Here are your options. You can get me 5 slices, 10 slices, or 20 slices. And I was like, well, they don't come in those denominations. I was like, I could get you 6. She's like, I said 5, 10, or 20. That's the deal. You choose. I'm like, no. This is what I do to you. You don't get to then reverse it onto me.
Yeah.
And everything to her is this negotiation at this point. So this is a Christmas story. I put her to bed on Christmas Eve night.
Okay.
And I'm like, Lil, I know you're excited. This is one of the first years she's super excited for Christmas. So she's having trouble sleeping. And she's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to sleep. I was like, Lil, if you don't fall asleep, like Santa might not come and deliver the presents. And she's like, wait, why though? And I was like, well, it's in the song, like he knows when you are sleeping.
Yeah, okay, that song is concerning.
It's like, it's a problematic song.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay. How does he know though? I'm like, that's the song. Like he's
watching you. There's an elf on the shelf. Don't worry about it.
Like I did not grow up with this Santa tradition. This is what the song says, okay? And she's like, oh, I know. I'll just close my eyes and then he won't know that I'm actually awake. I'm like, you're 4. You're fooling Santa. You're 4. Everything to her is this negotiation and this manipulation. So
what are you going to do at 14?
Oh, well, that's the thing. I am smarter than her. So
for now,
I think that for yeah, you're right. I'm in trouble.
But Lily is the perfect balance of like just sheer determination and just like sweetness.
And she gets that from both Brittany, my wife, and I. We are as stubborn as they come. And when we set our mind on something, it's like this will happen. Whether that's 5 pieces, 10 pieces, or 20 pieces of pizza.
Yeah. She can be equally terrifying and just beautiful. Like, because she'll pull this stuff with like your friends too. Like if we're at the house, like it's not like this is just the way she talks to mom and dad because she's comfortable. It's like she's making deals left, right, and center. She's letting people know, no, you're like, this is where you sit. This is where you're sitting. I was like, okay. What should I eat first? Like you tell me. And we are all slaves to it, but she's great.
Yeah, like we made corn on the barbecue this summer and she was insistent on handing out the corn. The corn on the cobs are like as big as her.
Yeah.
And she's holding these tongs, trying to pick them up.
Yeah, like
It's
we're
covered in
breaking
butter, they're sliding.
dishes. Like nothing about it is efficient, but it's
She's
like, okay.
Alex, do you want corn? You're like, oh, I'm not going to have some corn today. It's time for corn.
Yes.
Here is your corn.
That literally happened. Yeah, she's the best. So, but we've talked about, and I've kind of asked you about this because, there's that saying that like, you never know you can love someone so much until you have your own kids, right? And we haven't had our own kids, so I have been waiting for that. But when we started fostering, I felt like I got a taste of that. And I'm not sure if it's going to evolve or expand when we do have our own kids. But I feel like when we welcomed that first child into our home, that I felt that stretching of my heart. I was feeling, and we've talked about this personally, and now we're going to talk to everyone on the internet about it. But I've started to feel things that I had never felt before.
As the listener should know, feeling, not one of your, I wouldn't say strengths.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily going to ascribe a strength or weakness.
I'm growing into it.
Yeah, it's not something you normally do.
Yeah, like, a couple years ago, I would have described myself as dead inside. But I'm growing, I'm learning.
words.
And we had this little one over the Christmas holidays. It was his third time with us, but this time he was with us for 2 weeks. And I tweeted about this on Twitter because I was doing the dad thing. I was home alone. Rebecca was at work or whatever. And this little guy, he's 8 months, so he does some napping. And I tweeted this, that parenting is equal parts wishing your child would fall asleep while at the same time wishing they would wake up from their nap because you miss them so much. So like I'd be on the couch with this little guy and I'm trying to get some work done or something. I'm like, let's try a nap. Like, let's just see if he'll go down because like daddy needs to like do some stuff that doesn't involve me giving him all my attention right now. So it's like, try to put him down for a nap. No, I was hoping he was going to have a nap. He is not on the same level. So it didn't work. So he's up for another half an hour, 60 minutes. I'm like, let's try a bottle, then a nap. So I go bottle, nap. He finally falls asleep. I'm watching him in the monitor. He finally falls asleep. You feel that rush of relief. It's like, oh, I can get up and make a coffee. I can do some work.
The feeling when your child is finally asleep
Yeah.
is impossible to articulate. The joy,
Oh my
relief,
God.
anxiety just sucking out of you.
Yeah, just the weight
Instantly.
of 1,000 babies just falls right off your shoulders. And so I make my coffee. I sit down on the couch. I'm like, so is he up yet? And I'm like looking at the monitor and be like, I could probably wake him up now. He's been asleep for like 4 minutes. I'm like, I just love you so much. I just want to wake you up to spend time with you. And just this dichotomy of like just wanting to have your agency back, but also wanting to just spend all of your time with these children is troubling. It's terrible. It is tearing my heart apart on the inside. But what I'm learning, is and this is a hypothesis that,
Everything in parenting is a hypothesis.
but this one is about myself. I think, here's my hypothesis,
I'd love to hear it.
that we have within ourselves an infinite capacity to express love, to hold people in our hearts. And here's what I mean by that. So the first baby comes, my heart gets stretched. I'm feeling things I've never felt before.
Grinch style.
And then we say goodbye, and my heart breaks. And Rebecca and I sit on the couch to now an empty home and ask, like, how are we going to do that again? A couple days goes by, the phone rings again, another baby comes. We love on him, say goodbye, heart breaks again. And Rebecca and I have been going through like these mountains and valleys, these ups and downs, and asking ourselves, like, is this going to get any easier? And all of our foster families saying like, no, it never gets any easier. And we're like, okay, then how can we keep doing this? And I think it's because if we agree with the process, I think our hearts have an infinite capacity to be stretched in order to grow. Because like if you think about an elastic band, if you stretch it for a long time and then let go, it never goes back to its original shape and size, right? It's always bigger than how it started. But I was thinking about stretching dough and how you stretch dough in order to strengthen it. And I'm convinced, and I'm learning this through parenting, I'm convinced, and through pastoring, which is basically parenting, I'm convinced that our hearts, if we would agree with the process, have an infinite capacity to stretch in order to hold a greater capacity.
Well, you know that my word for 2020 is capacity, the year of capacity, in which I want to test that hypothesis because I feel like I believe that deep in my soul as well.
Yeah.
In that, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And in the past, I've like been really good at work for a phase, and then I'm really good at home, and then I'm really good like with friendships, and then I'm really good with my personal health. But it's like I can never like seem to get all of everything aligned at once. And life is busy, and there's a lot going on. But I have this intrinsic belief that I just have to expand my capacity, my ability to hold all of these things, and I can be enough for all of these things. Because I refuse to believe it's like, oh well, this is just too much. This is too hard. Like I can't be this involved with my friends and this healthy, or I can't be like this involved at home and have a thriving business. It's like no, I just never want to come to the place where I can like believe those things. I would rather spend my life like trying than to resign myself that this is the case. And I think you're right that like the way that we're made in God's image is that like within our fabric is this infinite ability to love. And this is one thing like my wife and I always talk about. My wife is Brittany. She's like, We can't have a second kid because I could never love them like this first one.
Right.
And everyone that has more than one kid is like laughing cruelly at us right now. But I think it's the same thing. You have this second kid, and you're like, oh, this part of my heart, oh, didn't know that was there.
Right.
Or my heart expanded again, Grinch style.
Yeah. And with a greater capacity, I think comes greater responsibility. And I'm learning that in pastoring as well. If I am going to let my heart be stretched to contain a greater capacity, it's my responsibility to make sure I'm using that capacity.
Yes.
You know? And not just for a season, but always seeking opportunities to be stretched so that I can grow to hold more people or hold the people that I'm currently holding better.
A hopeful end to this episode of the Pro Church Tools Show. In the midst of some hopelessness, but
We've come full circle.
We have come full circle.
It's the journey of life.
If you have questions, comments, leave them in the YouTube comments below or head to prochurchtools.com. Make sure you are subscribed so you never miss another episode. You can subscribe on YouTube for the video version if you want to see the clothes we're wearing. See how pasty our skin is in this Canadian
Not for
winter.
long. Not for long. We're headed to the sun.
Bless.
Yes. Thank you,
Bless.
Lord.
And that'll do it for this episode. We'll see you next time.